This is the Fifth Estate winning headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. But we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 8th of August, 2019, and I am 2J.
I am JM.
And I am Miss K, your host. Again, in case you missed it, this is Winning Headlines. Let's take a look at today's headlines.
Yes.
The Standard. CS governor named in land row killings. Daily Nation, 1998 bomb survivors to miss 430 billion shilling pay. And The Star, RUTO's dilemma as fresh Mao evictions loom. I say let's start with this dilemma that RUTO is in.
Appropriately called a dilemma, I think, because RUTO is in a catch-22 here.
Yes, that's
Yes.
He is the leader of the Kalenjin nation.
So we believe.
Right? Yeah. But, and so politically, you know, he owes them some sort of protection regarding the Mao, but also in the interests of the state, we need to protect the Mao.
Exactly. So unfortunately, the
Mm.
second round of evictions are supposed to be happening next week. So yes, as you said, he has this dilemma. Does he go with his people and protect them, what they believe to be theirs, or does he go with the environmental conservancy that the government is trying to ensure? So who knows? But I think we said this. It seems like a bit of a sponsored headline.
Well, I would say, I would agree for this reason.
Yeah.
Every time you bring up Mao and Mao evictions, there's some things that are sticky and there's some things that we'll remember, at least politically.
Yes.
It's not the first time that it has happened, and it's not the first time that it has been used as, if I could call it, I don't know, a double-edged sword. You take it and you ruin someone else's career.
Poison chalice.
Poison chalice. So, RAILA Odinga had a similar issue with the Mao, I think in the 2013, where he was against the...
He was for the evictions.
And because he was
actually
for the
drove
evictions,
that process. Something like an assignment that Kibaki had given to him.
that was the poison that steered away the wind from him, because then you had the Kalenjin nation to the last man voting against him. So I don't know if they're saying this, and they're planting little things, like in the story they say that the Kipsigis elders went to see Raila to ask him to speak to the president to have them not
Say that
sounds sponsored.
It sounds sponsored. The Kipsigis leaders went to Raila to ask
the president to stall the eviction, bearing in mind that they're one of their own, a brother. William Ruto is the deputy president.
Exactly.
He doesn't have an amorphous position. He has a fixed position in law in which he has actual influence.
Exactly. So I think with this headline, we see that whoever paid for this, they are trying to pit RUTO against the government, which makes no sense because RUTO is the government itself.
Or RUTO against his own people. Discrediting him amongst the Kipsigis in the Kalenjin nation.
So are we saying
which is supposed to cost him politically?
He will suffer the same fate as Raila?
I don't know.
In 2022.
He may, but we can see, if the evictions are happening, then we will keep seeing this headline coming up over and over again. And we'll keep seeing a play out of those issues. The little issues that play out on the ground on whether we should be evicted, why we were there in the first place, why are we encroaching it. All those issues will be played out politically. But we have a three-part criteria that we use to break down the headlines for you. We ask ourselves three questions. Is this headline topical, or is it speculative? Is it repetitive, or is it groundbreaking? And finally, is it thoughtful or just plain lazy?
I think it's a bit speculative, but I think it's a great headline. Whoever did pay for this, if somebody did, they got good value for money.
Let's park it. And before we leave government, let's talk about the CS and governor named in land row killing.
Yes. So this is basically a report about a story of a land company in Murang'a. And a few years ago, there were a series of deaths of the directors of that company. The company was formed in it's called Kihihu Mwiri. It was formed in 1965. And basically a series of, deals gone sour ended up in murders, and the CS and the governor were adversely mentioned. So the judge who was presiding over this matter said that those two people of interest should actually have given statements and given testimony in court. My take.
Toss it.
That's a bit of a hard story, isn't it?
And finally, 1998 bomb survivors to miss 430 billion pay. I imagine it had skipped my mind that we are...
Yeah, that's 21 years yesterday.
It really did skip my mind. And I am so apologetic.
Yeah. I think the fault here lies with the the people who, the passers-by who are passing by, they should have come together and perhaps, filed a suit as well.
Yeah, so the context here is that the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court has issued an order saying that only those who were employees of the American embassy in Kenya have rights to claim this 430 billion. The passers-by who either got injured or died as a result of this event cannot claim any of the money. And I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah,
it is quite sad.
It is quite sad. Especially, for instance, for the passerbys who died, they are verified. Their names are verified. They're in that, and they're in that in the memorial. In that place, when your name was put on that tablet, it was verified that you were there and that you passed away, and therefore your name appeared on that tablet. So I think, at the very least, those whose families are named on that tablet should be paid.
A very important point that should be made is that anywhere that America goes, trouble follows. So I think it's very unfair that Kenyan civilians who had nothing to do with the American embassy ended up becoming casualties and now have no right to claim any of this money. Tuam was making an interesting point earlier. He was saying that the American embassy, walking around with an American is as dangerous as walking around with a black person is in America. So I think that they need to reevaluate this and give that due money to those people.
I think
it's
so
also
too.
Unfortunate that at that time, whenever you're a victim of a crime, of an incident, you don't think about legislating, or you don't think about going to court, or you don't think about banding together to protect yourselves. You're just thinking about getting well. And once you get well and you find out, I could have been compensated, you have no way to absolutely prove that the injuries that you received came from that particular incident, which I think is sad for these people.
So between these two headlines, I would go with
the Star.
I think it's sticky, it's good, it's a bit speculative, but in a good way.
Absolutely.
Okay,
in a
then
good way.
we go with the Star.
All right,
and the Star gives us our winning headline.
That's the nation.
What's that?
On to our next segment, the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Just like the headlines, we have a 3-part criteria that we use to break them down for you. We ask ourselves, is the cartoon humorous or is it dry? Is it satirical or is it pessimistic? And finally, is it effective or just plain lazy?
Let's start with the Daily Nation. Victor Ndula.
Victor Ndula has a caricature of a pig. I think this is in reference to our own M-pigs. Very heavy these pigs are. They are sinking
Very heavy.
the a plane that is titled Wage Bill. And the caption is, "Oink, M-pigs and MCAs coming to America." I do love that tattoo.
The tattoo. I know. I just realized right now. Because normally, like that kind of tattoo, you'd get it to say, "I love mum."
Yes.
So I guess he's trying to say that this is what the M-pigs love.
Allowances. Absolutely. That's what they live for.
I do love this cartoon. I find it funny. It's true, 85 of them went to a seminar that did not, at conference that did not require all that huge number.
Yeah, we sent the biggest delegation.
I see it. Wage bill, it's sinking us. And now I'm pigs who come to America, reference to the movie.
I say let's look at the other cartoons. Let's put this in the parking bay. The Star, Ozone. Okay, guys. This conspiracy gets stranger and stranger.
Do you want to describe this one for us?
This conspiracy gets stranger and stranger by the day. We've said before that we think that Victor Ndula is Ozone and Ozone is Victor Ndula. And just day after day, I don't know if they're trolling us, but day after day, this seems to be coming true. So today's cartoon, we have Joho, who is standing there again like yesterday, taking a selfie. And in the background, you have pangas, which are in the shape of the tusks that you have in Mombasa City.
On Moi Avenue.
Yeah, and it says here, Karibu Mombasa, missing the bigger picture. Again, this is in reference to the attacks that happened earlier this week.
And the fact that I think he's in the US.
He's in the US.
America, right?
Taking selfies with Paris Hilton. Yes, we mentioned this yesterday. So it's strange that he used the exact same motif that Victor Ndula did yesterday.
The selfie look.
However, I will say, I like this cartoon better than the Ndula one. Yes.
I do agree. It's much nicer. Also, the reference, I do prefer this reference to the knives. I mean, yesterday, I took issue with that guy in the middle from Wakali holding the knife as a panga. No, I took issue with that. But this is better because the reference to the tusks is always iconic.
That's true.
Absolutely. And then the blood is also, I think, a good touch.
Yeah.
Macabre as that may be.
Put it in the parking bay. Everything's in the parking bay.
Everything's in the parking bay.
What do we have in the standard?
So, what we
I would say toss.
The Daily Nation? I actually agree. Let's just do it.
Okay, toss that one. All right, so what we have here is a teacher implementing the new competence-based curriculum. They're outside of a classroom. There's no classroom, actually. They're under a tree. And the caption says, CBC, question mark. What CBC? And he's being interviewed there by the press.
Yeah.
Right, and this is in reference to the rollout of the competence-based curriculum by the Ministry of Education. I think, honestly, what the Ministry of Education really needed this time to roll this out is a dictator. And Uhuru made a good decision in appointing Magoha for that position. Absolutely.
But I think what this cartoon is...
I would have flipped it, and I would say that, what Magoha is doing right now with CBC is implementing an imperfect plan violently. And that's not a bad thing, especially when you're coming up against a curriculum that has been there for about 30 years.
Yeah, with a lot
people
of
are going to resist change. Yeah, people are going to resist change. So I see the glass half full, not half empty.
Yeah, so Garu is talking about the glass half empty, because I think here he's talking about how CBC requires a lot of technological advances, and there's a lot of schools in Kenya in the rural areas that do not have the funding to pursue those things. So the teacher...
Look at where they're learning. How am I going to...
But this
it sounds very conceptual.
But this is not even. This is not even true. The number of classrooms in Kenya since 2002, structured very many. This rarely happens.
So maybe he's being negative. I think we toss it in light of what we have from Ozone.
And I cannot believe that, Tuja, you're saying this, but Ozone of the Star gives us our winning cartoon. What's our final thought?
And now, our final thought. Brought to you today by a book entitled The Laws of Wealth, Psychology and the Secret to Investing Success. So before we start, I want to read a little story that is from the book. And he tells a story in this book about the King Rama of Thailand, who on the occasion of his 60th birthday decided to enact a historic event to show how big and grand he was. So what was the gift? He chose to grant amnesty to over 30,000 prisoners. And the year was 1998. And before that, the HIV virus in Thailand had largely been contained to the prison system. But with the release of tens of thousands of prisoners into a country which had a thriving sex industry, that changed very quickly. Within 365 days, as many as 1 in 3 prostitutes had HIV. So with sad predictability, married men soon began to contract this disease and then eventually took it into the suburbs to their unsuspecting partners. So then with over 1 million Thais already affected and nearly 1% of the population being sex workers, the projections for future HIV was very horrifying. And so in response to this, the government convened a task force led by a doctor. So he was charged with effectively scaring the population straight. So his team created a dramatic scare pieces with tags like, "The plague is coming." And when people checked the progress a few years later, they found that this scared straight tactic didn't do anything. In fact, it backfired on them and had a very negative utility. So the problem was getting so bad, they decided to change tact. So now what they decided to do was pinpoint the root of the problem. So 97% of all HIV infection cases came from sex with prostitutes. So this information told the doctor to focus on the source. He must convince the sex workers to use condoms instead. So where fear had once ruled, the plague is coming, he decided to work on education, and this education took hold. So by the late 1990s, they had projected that 5 million Thais ought to have HIV, but this actually didn't happen because they changed the tactic from fear-mongering to education-based system. So in the book, the author is telling us that shame and fear are very poor incentives, and they're very bad motivators to encourage good behavior. So this book was written by a man named Dr. Daniel Crosby in 2016. He's a psychologist and a behavioral finance expert. So in this book, he really offers accessible and applicable takes on finance, which have long been missed by the financial world or the self-help finance world.
Because they focus on fear as opposed to education. So for a long time, economists have told us that we are irrational, that we are rational beings, that we focus on maximum utility, that we are self-interested. But from behavioral economics, we have learned that we are actually very irrational. And we've done a book on that.
We have, yes.
Predictably irrational.
We make lots of mistakes and we do not learn from them. But in this book, he says that, yes, we can identify those things, but it's not useful if we're not giving people practical ways to learn from that. He says philosophizing is not helpful. So in this book, he focuses on behavior change and practical ways to learn how to be better at keeping your finances in check.
But most importantly, he says that we have no choice.
Yes.
We have absolutely no choice, and that all of us, every single one of us, you and me, have to become investors. And there's a very simple logic for saying this. Most of us are employed. Or if you're not employed, you have a business, but your business doesn't give you back. Yes, the business can be profitable, but what do you yourself take from the business? Probably averages as much as I make as an employed person. So if we're all employed, we must invest in risk in order to be able to make money. So let me give you an example. If we say, and I didn't say it, but the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics data says that the average Kenyan takes home about 53,000 shillings every month. So for the sake of this illustration, let's say that you take home 50,000 shillings. The average Kenyan takes home 50,000 shillings every month. This week we learned that you're supposed to pay yourself first. So if I'm paying myself first and I'm saving for my future, and I want to have a nest egg when I retire, I'm going to take 10% of my 50K and I'm going to save it. So if I earn 50K every month, at the end of the year, averagely, I have an annual income of 600,000 shillings. If I've been saving 10% of this, then I have about 60,000 shillings every year. Now, how long do I take to work? If we say I'm a good Kenyan and I got a good job, I was lucky. At the age of 25, I got a job.
For your first serious job.
First serious job, and I started earning this 50K, but I'm going to keep it constant all through. Yes. So we understand it? Are we with
for
me?
the sake of simplifying.
For the sake of simplifying this illustration. So I started working when I was 25. Retirement age is 65. I'm going to work until the last day. That gives me 40 good years to work. I'm saving 10% of my money faithfully so that I can have something when I retire to live on. So after 40 years of saving this money, I have 2.4 million shillings in my account. But bear in mind,
that sounds like a lot, but is it?
It's a lot today. I don't even know if it's a lot today. But bear in mind that there's inflation. So my 2.4 million, the buying power of it has lost value at that time, over that 40-year period. And also bear in mind that if I was to take that 2.4 million, I could live for another maybe 20 years. So let's say quality of life in Kenya has improved. I'm going to live until I'm 85. So if I'm going to live until I'm 85, let's see how long my 2.4
can carry you.
2.4 can take me. It'll be about 120K every year. That comes down to about 10K every month.
Oh boy,
and that gives me 300 bob every day. All I'll be able to afford
for the next 20 years.
Next 20 years, all I'll be able to afford is a chicken in lunch for the next 20 years.
And that doesn't account for the fact that you are aging and therefore require more health care.
In fact, most likely I'll use that entire 2.4 million on my healthcare costs annually.
Annually alone, right?
This is ridiculous.
And so basically, still in the first part of the book, he says the irony then, so we all need to invest in the stock market.
Yeah,
definitely. But the irony is that we are psychologically ill-equipped to invest in that market.
That's very true.
And so what he does then is to give us 9 rules of self-management to cultivate a good investment behavior. Right? These are the lessons that you should learn and then apply in the market. I'm going to focus on 4 very quickly. Number 1. You can't do this alone, he says. You ought to get a financial advisor.
And right? I agree. I agree with him.
An expert. Number 2, trouble, he says, is opportunity. And, you know, a lot of wealthy moguls in the West talk about this. The time of maximum pessimism is the best time to buy. And the time of maximum optimism is the best time to sell.
I believe Warren Buffett said that.
Yes.
But the irony is that we do the opposite. Whenever you've lost money or your stocks are doing poorly, then you sell them. And the price is really low.
Precisely.
And whenever everything is going well or the market is doing well or a particular company is doing well is when you choose to buy their shares.
Yeah. Now, number 3, he says, once you've begun to invest, be cautious of overconfidence. And so he titles this as You Are Not Special. Overconfidence is the belief that you are all-knowing, you're infallible. And he further cautions against what he calls fundamental attribution error, meaning the tendency to own success and delegate misfortune. Right? And so he says that we shouldn't be overconfident. We should because overconfidence, when you become overconfident, you ignore potential dangers, you're over-optimistic on the stock, and you also veer away from your own personal competence and begin to make decisions which end up costing you. Now the last, and this book has a lot of stories, and he gives this last one through a story which I will also give. He says, once you succeed, beware, because excess is never permanent, right? And he says a savvy investor must be like the king of the East who was told by his advisors that this too shall pass.
Now, statement
here's a story of the king, right? As you know, heavy is the head that wears the crown, goes the saying,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so once upon a time, there was a king, and with this heavy crown on his head, he asks his advisors, please make me a ring that will make me happy when I am sad.
Oh.
So the advisors went away, and they
Thought about
thought
this
long
problem.
and hard, and they said, what shall we do? So they made the ring, and they said that they would inscribe a phrase, and the phrase was, this too
Shall
shall pass. Now, it was a brilliant phrase because actually it did make him happy when he
because
was
every
sad.
time he was sad, he would look at the inscription and say,
This too shall pass,
But I
right?
think there's
But it also had the unintended consequence of making him sad when he was happy.
Because you look at it, the same
When he's
reason
happy,
you go like,
this too shall pass.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's the story of both business and the stock market as well. It moves in cycles.
Yeah.
So you've got booms and busts.
Yeah.
And the lesson for investors here is simple, and it borrows from the story of Joseph. In times of feast, prepare for famine.
Yes.
In times of famine, prepare for a feast.
that goes against our nature as human beings, and I think that's what he says. He says that the rules of investment and the rules of markets flip what we do as human beings totally on its head.
Yeah.
Because I would tell you, and I'm telling you, were it not for the books of this week, in times of feast, I will feast.
Yes.
In times of famine, I will
will
cry. That's all I will do as a human being. I will not be preparing for those things. But this is Winning Headlines. This week we've tried to take you through some cliches, and today we're trying to give you actual advice, if I could call it that. It's 2016 was when this book was written, and I guess he's had hindsight as benefit, and he references several books that we have reviewed, and some that we have yet to review.
And
but
unlike some of
advice.
the other books, at the end of every chapter, he gives practical and useful advice for how you can implement his ideas, which I think is fantastic.
So I think
The
today we're
rules.
trying to help ourselves. There's a reason why all the other books are so timeless. It's because we're still trying, aspiring, waiting, hoping to get rich. But here,
Kate, it is the 8th of the month. Have you put aside your 10%?
oh, definitely.
So we're investing it tomorrow?
We're definitely investing it tomorrow, because that's the lesson we've learned.
We've learned today.
We're not just keeping it away,
Exactly.
because if we keep it away, it loses value.
Yes.
Absolutely.
But we're
We're
making
invested.
it make money.
Double it, triple
I
it.
will end with this statement, but first let me remind us. We had a winning, it's double day.
Double star.
It is.
We had a winning headline from The Star and a winning cartoon from Ozone of The Star. There's a thing that he says at this book, and he calls it River Jordan problems. And if you think about River Jordan, there's a story about a gentleman in the Bible called Naaman who was told to go and dip himself in that very dirty river so that he could rid himself of leprosy. But he didn't want to do it because it felt like such a simplistic thing to do, and that's the problem with all of us. And he calls those River Jordan problems. Those are complex problems with simple solutions that go unrecognized because they are so simple. And that's, I think, the thing with making wealth.
Yeah.
Everyone has given us such simple solutions for what we should do, how we should invest, how we should think.
Common sense.
And what is wrong with us? What we lack? Common sense.
Common sense.
And because it is common sense, we have discovered that common sense is not that common.
Yeah.
So this week we're inspiring you to go and try and implement. We will try ourselves.
Yes, we are.
Then we'll review after 40 years. Because the other thing he tells us in this book is be patient.
Yes.
Have a great day and see you tomorrow.